All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Satin Blair. I am the career consultant for EPPS and IS. And today we are doing the final installment of the EPPS Pathways to Employment, and we are speaking to professionals in the nonprofit sector. So I will be your moderator today. Just a few housekeeping things. If you can have, and you do have any questions, please type them into the chat. And as we go along, my colleague and sidekick, Jason, will be moderating the chat. And so we will provide time for a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, please feel free to participate in the chat. I would like to welcome our guest, and if you guys could just introduce yourself and let our students know a little bit about who you are, your current position, maybe the ties you have to UTD, and a little bit about your educational background. And does anybody want to go? I'll take volunteers, or I can call.
I can go ahead. I'll start out if you want me to. Hi, everyone. My name's Paul Dunne. I'm a CFRE. I'm presently the Senior Vice President for Catapult Fundraising, which is a consulting firm based out of Henderson, Nevada, with offices in Dallas, Texas, that I head up, and then also in New Jersey and New York. My ties to UTD, besides living about 2 blocks away, is that I am also friends with Holly Miori, who a lot of you on the call will know, and I am the incoming president of the AFP Greater Dallas chapter, also sit on the AFP International Foundation, and Holly sits on my board for the 2021 year. I went, educational background, I went to a small little Baptist school in Brownwood, Texas. I don't see anybody giving a big hello for Brownwood, so probably not as well known. Howard Payne University, where I was actually privileged to go back as their executive vice president in charge of advancement later in my career, probably about 10 years ago now. Interestingly enough, I was a vocal performance major. For about the first 20 years, 25 years of my life, because like many of us, there wasn't, at my time at least, being the older guy in the group here, there wasn't a nonprofit kind of degree or any type of path towards that. And so I did musical theater and work on television, so I have my Screen Actors Guild and my equity card, so completely a different path. So, and if you on the call want to do a duet or anything, I'm up for it later. So that's how I started, guys.
I will jump in next. I'm Dhriti Stocks. I am a very proud CFRE as well, very proud MPA alum of UT Dallas, and currently in the PhD program as well here at UT Dallas. I spend my days as the Director of Corporate Relations for the Girl Scouts of Northeast Texas. And so I work with all of our corporate partners, very proud to be in fundraising, have spent my entire career in fundraising after majoring in math in college. So just like Paul, there's no straight shots in this world. So glad to be here with everyone. Looking forward to the opportunity.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Reyes. I go by Becca. My ties to UT Dallas is that I got my bachelor's in 2018. I graduated with a bachelor's in public affairs, and then during my senior year, I did the fast track and graduated last winter with my MPA from UT Dallas. And I worked at UT Dallas for several years while I was a student, and I worked in the School of Arts and Humanities, as well as the Ackerman Center for Holocaust Studies. And when I graduated, I spent a couple months still working at UT Dallas, and then transferred over to work as the interim VP of Operations and Chief Advocate for Paper for Water, which is a small local nonprofit, and we use the art of origami to fund clean water and sanitation projects in about 20 different countries around the world. And then I also have another job, which I'm at right now, which is called the Dallas Area Parkinsonism Society. And there I'm their office manager.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Rebecca, I did not know that about paper for water. I actually can fold origami.
We always need volunteers. So if you can fold, we will gladly take you.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I might have to take you up on that. Very cool. I always, anytime I'm asked in any kind of interview, you know, what do you have? What unusual skill do you have? I'm like, I can fold origami. So yeah, all right, awesome. Thank you guys. Paul, if you will kick off this next question based on kind of what you told me, tell us a little bit, elaborate a little bit more about your academic history and tell us how like your course of study has been helpful in your career. I know you mentioned acting and things like that. So yeah, if you don't mind starting us off on this next question.
No problem. Yeah, it's kind of a strange road. Howard Payne University is actually a university that's a Southern Baptist college, back then much more so, liberal arts college, and I went there honestly with the point of becoming a music director in churches, which is what I did for a little while, and then went into the acting and singing part of it. One of the final churches that I had was actually in Southern California. I did background. This has nothing to do with fundraising, but I did background for Peter Cetera. So for those of you who are younger, you'll know probably the Karate Kid theme he did. So I did that tour with him as one of his vocalists, and then I did Young and Restless for about a year, the soap opera there. So it was when I was young and restless and not old and sedate like I am now. And by the way, we're all sedate kind of right now. So went into that, but I got to tell you, it obviously made me very comfortable in doing presentations in front of donors. It allowed me, while I was doing that work, you know, while you do acting, you have to do side gigs. If you're not working all the time, which is 90% of the actors. And so I got into sales a lot, and sales really allowed me to get to what I teach about whenever I do presentations, which is about the return on investment. You know, when you're doing a sale, it's always an exchange of something. I'm giving you this money for these goods. And we don't really have that as much in our work as fundraisers, except we do. The donors, there is an expectation, and especially as you work with your major donors, and that your major donors, you know, we call it an impact. They want to know what the impact is. I call it for them a return on investment. So when that donor comes in, you know, your larger donors, I had a large donor on the Big Island of Hawaii when I was finishing up a $32 million campaign there. And it's a well-known donor. We're using his product right now. It's Gordon Moore, who was the founder of Intel. And I remember picking up $1 million check from him. And Gordon had been giving the organization about $50,000. And he looked at me and he said, Paul, you know, I'll give you $50,000 as a taster. But to get money like this, you have to give me a return on my investment. And so that's something, you know, we learn from our donors, and half of acting is listening, because you have to react to your other person. And so I learned that a lot with our donors. So there was, you know, I never think that they're connected, but there was a little bit of connection. And plus the fact, if the donor asks me to break out in a song, I am ready to go with them. So we can do that at any time at the drop of a hat. So yeah, it just trained me in being much more comfortable in front of them. And also in acting, you're kind of putting on, and singing, you're putting on that character. And so, you know, hearing Rebecca talk, I mean, she's involved with 3 nonprofits right now, right, that she's working with. And so at any moment, she has to put on that different hat or that different character of that organization whenever she does that. You know, she has to have passion for that group. And so I think my training at least helped me with that passion area for us to have it. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Rebecca, can you kind of tell me about your academic history and how your chosen course of study has been helpful to you in your current career?
Sure. So I was really fortunate. I started taking a couple of college courses during my senior year in high school, and I got involved with a club that specifically worked with different nonprofits around the community college that I went to. So I was able to work with small nonprofits and some large nonprofits as well, really early on in my college career. And I didn't know going into college what I wanted to do. And so I was lucky that early on I got some experience and found that I really enjoyed understanding more about the administrative and management responsibilities and what it takes. And that led to me deciding specifically I chose UT Dallas because of the degree in public affairs, and was very easily looped into doing the MPA program, which was great because I was given multiple opportunities to work specifically with nonprofits that I was interested in. So I was able to interview some directors and leaders in the nonprofit field while I was studying, and that definitely helped me to go into the nonprofit field with more understanding and a greater, I guess, perspective going directly into my career after graduating.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Dhriti, can you follow as well with your academic history and your course of study, how it's been helpful?
So I, like I said, I have a math major from Austin College up in Sherman, Texas. And a major in pure math is not useful. It's not going to get you a job. And I learned that the hard way by getting one and then realizing there were no jobs. And so the one advantage for Austin College was that their entire curriculum, their entire ethos is based around servant leadership. And so I did a lot of service projects and service activities throughout the organization. And so when I was like, there are no jobs, what do I do? The answer was the AmeriCorps program. So if any of you are not familiar with the AmeriCorps program, I highly recommend looking it up. It is a national service program. You get to serve with a nonprofit in the community for anywhere from 3 months to a full year, and even longer if you choose. And you get to get a lot of crazy experience right up front and figure out everything that you want to do in life, which is what happened to me. So I started out as an AmeriCorps member with the idea that I would, do this for a little while until I got a real job. And I ended up falling in love. And I fell in love with the opportunity to serve students. That's what I was doing in my AmeriCorps project. But I also learned at the same time that I didn't necessarily want to work with students all day. And so when there was an opportunity in fundraising, I thought, this is perfect. I get to make the connections between the donors and the students and make all of the great impact, but I don't have to deal with children. And so the process of graduate school at UT Dallas has been me just falling further down the rabbit hole. My MPA helped me really refine, how this nonprofit field works. It helped me get better and serve my organizations better and move up in the organizations. And the PhD program is helping me further refine that so that we can all work together to make the greatest change possible.
Satin, if I could say real quick, AmeriCorps is amazing. 2 of the clients that I work with right now have AmeriCorps volunteers, and they are desperately needed by the nonprofit. The nonprofit literally feels like they hit the lottery when they get an AmeriCorps volunteer because they're that good. It's fantastic. So I will echo what you say on that. I think it's a great organization.
Thank you. So just next, I just want to kind of give the students, this panel is great. I mean, just such a wealth of experience, and you guys have such different paths, and I really love that because I think it's important for students to see people in their chosen careers, right? If you can see it, if you can visualize it for yourself. And so I'd kind of like to give them, I know this will look different for everybody, especially Rebecca, if you want to kick this question off, since you work for several nonprofits, what does your typical day look like? Are you putting in a 40-hour work week? What type of projects are you working on? Do you have work-life balance, or is that just a dream?
No, I'm kidding. Yes, I am very lucky. You know, I graduated and then the pandemic happened and it was very stressful to find a position, and I knew I wanted something you know, in the nonprofit world, and I was very lucky to find 2 positions. I have one position where I'm at right now at the Dallas Area Parkinsonism Society, which is I work there mainly in the morning and then early afternoon. And then I go home and typically work from home for Paper for Water, and I'll work usually between 2:30 to 6. That job is much more the hours kind of can bleed into the night, and during the weekend it is it can be a little bit more just intense, just because of the work requirements that I have. And for that job, I'm the only employee. We have some fantastic board members, but we had our major virtual gala last month, so that was the busiest year of my life. And but it was fun and it was great. Thank goodness. So yes, typically I will work one of the jobs during the morning and afternoon, and then transition during mid-afternoon and night into my other position.
All right. And let's see, Dre, would you like to go to next, please?
Sure, I do not mind. So there is no work-life balance when you are working a full-time job and doing your PhD. So it is entirely by choice. Girl Scouts is great. It's a great organization for work-life balance. Of course, it's the Girl Scouts, so we understand that people need work-life balance and that women have responsibilities other than just doing their jobs. Men have responsibilities other than just doing their jobs. And so the organization is really great about being flexible. And what has been really, really fortunate for me in the recent past is that they're also really great about investing in my growth. And so my PhD is as important to them as it is to me, because they know that it will make me better and ultimately a better employee. And so while the work-life balance is limited, the opportunities are great. A typical day looks like this. I sit on Zoom calls all day because I work from home. They're either internal meetings. I always say that 50% of my job is herding cats and the other 50% of my job is talking to my donors. And so the internal meetings are around, you know, like Paul said, what kind of impact are we going to have? How are we going to leverage these opportunities for donors? How are we going to communicate the good work that we're doing? And then the other 50% is making sure that everybody knows what Girl Scouts is doing and our impact in the community.
Awesome. Okay, and Paul, I saw you giggle a little bit. So if you want to go ahead and follow it up and tell our students kind of what a typical workday looks like for you.
So so I really relate to both of you talking about when you talk about, yeah, I only work 40 hours a week. I don't think any development person has ever said that. So as you guys can see, I don't know if you can see behind me, but this is my bed because I'm at a hotel in Corpus Christi, Texas. So my job for the majority of my life, up until about 2.5 years ago, I was actually worked like both of you do, my colleagues who are on the call with me, for a nonprofit in a position, usually a vice president's position or executive director type position. And about 3 years ago, I got dragged kicking and screaming into the consulting field. And that is very, very true. I love working with organizations, getting to see the growth and doing that. It just so happened I had friends who I was working with in the Dallas area, and I was helping them on the side with year-end appeals and other things that would come on up. I just say year-end appeals because I know all three of us are in the neck deep in that right now, probably. So I would help them. And what happened is that one time, these 3 different friends I was speaking to, they all came to me and they said, listen, our executive director wants to talk with you. And when I had that conversation, the executive director said, what will it take for us to get more of you? How do we get more of you? Because I was just helping them for free, and I go, guys, I can't do it anymore. I mean, I have my own job, that I have to do. And so they all came up with a number that I'd asked for. And within, a month I was consulting. So I fell into it that way. My typical day is I am either, like many on this call, I do this a lot all day long. I probably average about 4 or 5 Ring Central or Zoom calls a day with clients and their donors, helping them out, or with executive directors. I presently work with 8 different clients that I work with here in Alabama. I have an arts center in Alabama that we're doing a new $10 million campaign for there. I've got a church that I'm working with in San Antonio that is doing a $3 million campaign. We kicked it off on March 1st. I don't know if any of you know, but that was when COVID hit. It's a $3 million campaign. We did our first Ask event online and raised 1.7 million on our first one. So they're going to be in there by Easter of next year. A client where I'm at in Corpus Christi, who we're bringing in Tim Tebow for a spring event that he's going to be speaking here at a ministry event. Then I have secular clients in Dallas. The Deaf Action Center is one of those that I work with there. I'm very close to them, and did a board call with them last night at 6 p.m. So it kind of runs the gambit, and I am one of those who right now, unfortunately, my clients have asked me to come in, most of them that are still meeting together for their board meetings. So I'm still doing a little traveling, but mine can be anything between capacity building, which we help a lot of organizations with. So taking them forward, a lot of them just haven't really honed in on what their impact and why they're there. And then others I do capital projects for. That I go in and just kind of travel around in those. So it's pretty wide swath in how my day goes. It's never boring. And the thing I really like is before I got into consulting, I had worked for a human services, a university, a hospital, animal welfare. And so I had worked kind of across the gambit. And so I had experience in knowing, when you work with a university, you have to work with the deans of schools, and you have to work with alumni, and you have to do that type of work, which is completely different from working with a human service organization. And then you just really go out when you start working with an arts organization, because you have memberships that are involved in them. So although they're nonprofit, they all have their different areas of specialties that you need to have for them.
Thank you, Paul, so much for that insight. I love, you guys all have that kind of common thread in your volunteer work. So that you started somewhere with some organization on a whim or out of the servant leadership, that kind of thing, and you all landed exactly where you're supposed to be. I think that's an incredible story to kind of lean into. None of you were exactly looking for it, but it came. So I do love that. It does look like we have a question. Jason, can you go ahead and chime in with the question?
Sure can. First, sorry about that. For students who wish to seek a job in the nonprofit sector as full-time, what sort of skills and knowledge should they prepare for from now on? And where are good channels to approach nonprofit job opportunities?
So I'll jump in at one point, and then honestly, I'm going to leave it to you all, who are my younger colleagues, who really are on the cutting edge of things, since it took me, 2 hours to get on this call. But I will do it. But I'll tell you, one of the very best things that you need to start out with to get in a career is become a donor. You should become a donor. You need to learn what is good and what is bad. and how you give your gift. I can tell you the very first thing I do with any organizations that I give to, that I work with, is I usually give a donation. And it allows me to see where some problems are very quickly. My work when I came into this work is I was actually a businessman in Denver, Colorado. And we had, if you'll remember back, we had Columbine happen. I've been in it, this is my 20th year. So we had Columbine happen, and then a year later was 9/11. And so for me being a person of faith, I just felt that I was being told I needed to do something more with my life than just make a lot of money. And so I remember going to my wife and saying, I have good news and bad news. The good news is I really think I found what I want to do the rest of my life. The bad news is we're going to make a third of what we're making right now. By the way, I see a lot of agreement in that area. But you eventually grow into that, and it's become a profession now to where you can make a nice living in it. And even though we can't accept commissions or bonuses really, all you need is a hug from a patient or a thank you from a student, and that's absolutely all the bonus you need. But I think the best way to get in it is all of us have volunteered, so you need to volunteer in it. But I would suggest you also become a donor. My first job came, I was a major donor, gave about $12,000 a year to the Denver Rescue Mission. And after 9/11, their development officer called me up and said, hey, Paul, we haven't heard from you in a little while. You know, have we done anything wrong? I just want to make sure. And I said, no, everything is all right. Just, you know, I worked in the recruiting field. I had a recruiting firm. And I said, it's just no one needs us right now. So we're hitting a little bit of a bump. And he says, Paul, he goes, have you ever thought about doing what I do? And I honestly said to him, what in the world do? You just call me. I mean, I don't know. He goes, well, working for the homeless shelter. And I go, can't you guys get volunteers to serve the food? Are they pay you to serve people? I had no idea what they did. And I found out going in for my first interview, I'm not ashamed to say, when they interviewed me and showed me the videos and talked to me about it, cried like a baby. And the guy who was the president, the executive director, you know, I saw this smile come across his face because he knew he had me. And he could have offered me, you know, $5 an hour, and I would have gone, yeah, I've got to do this, you know. So it was, yeah, so it was wonderful. So again, start donating to those groups also that you're interested in.
Interesting perspective. I wouldn't have thought to become a donor as as an employment path. But so do you guys have anything to add to that? I'll just let you kind of chime in.
Yeah, I would add to that. I mean, of course, donating, getting to know the organization is super important. But I think that it's also worthwhile to keep in mind that a lot of the skills that you would use in any job and to get any job are going to be super valuable in terms of getting a nonprofit job. So, I mean, to me, it all boils down to networks and who you know, and that's super duper important, you know, who you know in the community, who you are connected with through your volunteerism, who you're talking to in the community. Are you at the, in this case, virtual events, all of the things that are going on? Do you know the landscape really well? And those are going to be crucial pieces of information so that you get to know the nonprofits that you're interviewing with, but also get to know the people in the community that might be able to be helpful, and relying on, you know, the school and your professors and the folks in EPPS as well to leverage those networks in terms of employment or in terms of pursuing volunteer opportunities or internship opportunities.
I would also say that while you're still in school, and even after, I think it's really important to learn the language of the nonprofit area that you want to go into. So if you are interested in animal welfare, read their emails, read their newsletters, go through their websites. Learning the nonprofit's language each nonprofit has their own language, and it's a process that needs to be learned, but will be super helpful, and I think will really show a level of knowledge that's impressive to people when you're having a job interview. So take the time to read as much as possible about the nonprofits that you're interested in, because I think you'll gain a insight and perspective that will help kind of put you at sort of a top rung for a position.
Satin, and I would be remiss if I didn't say this, and Holly would kill me, but a really good way to network is to become part of the UTD AFP collegiate chapter that they're starting, that Catapult, my company, is sponsoring. And so you can become part of that, and your actual membership fee this year is paid for by us. So you can become a member for free. So I don't know who they contact at UTD, but I know that chapter is starting up, and we would love to have you. And secondly, my partners, my leadership team at Catapult, I would be remiss if I didn't say that one of the people that we hire, we have a big calling center, and our calling center is now obviously very remote. So for example, we have the Ronald Reagan Library, the Naval Academy. We have a lot of clients that we do their alumni calling forum with our callers, and the people that we hire are people right out of school, right out of college. So if you're looking for a position when you get out of school, contact me. We have a position for you. And I can't tell you, we have two of our senior members of our team that actually started in our calling center and worked their way up very quickly. So there's a thought too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So my next question is kind of, we talked about, you guys have kind of hit on the challenges of the job, with, the non-existent work-life balance and things like that. Tell me a little bit about the perks of the job. Like, is there, like, what gets you out of bed in the morning? You did talk about some of the downfalls, that maybe when you start out, it's not the money you dreamed of. But what are the perks? What drove you to continue in maybe a job that didn't have your dream salary, right? What kind of just gets you out of bed in the morning? Rebecca, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I think that some of the perks of the job is just overall that I'm in a position where I feel like I am providing a really good value, and I'm helping provide a need or fulfill a need. And I think that is really valuable. And even on days that are very stressful or very long, I think understanding and seeing that effort lead to a well being built, or seeing that we have people with Parkinson's who are getting better and feeling better from the exercise and speech classes that we provide at DAPS. I think that is very encouraging and is really the most fulfilling aspect of the job. And I think also, I was really fortunate to have to go into two jobs with really wonderful people. I was really, really lucky that the volunteers I work with and the other employees I work with have very servant leader hearts, and that has led to just wonderful friendships. And I feel very, very lucky that even if the jobs may have some challenges, where I am wearing 18 different hats, there has been a lot of grace. And I think that comes in the nonprofit sector, just because maybe even more so than other sectors, just given oftentimes the work that we do. And that has been very nice to see as I enter my career.
I would echo that, Rebecca, that everything else is a perk. I mean, there are a few things that are downsides, but everything else is a perk. For me, just being able to make the match between what the donor wants and the impact that they're going to have, that sort of matchmaking that happens, and the really, really important impact and the really big gifts that come out of that. That's what I love doing. I love it when people get to say yes, because what donors want to say yes, they want to do the important thing and make the important impact. And so just getting them there and getting them through that process is just so exciting for me. I will also say, just the nonprofit space has evolved even just in the time that I've been in nonprofit, from, like Paul was saying, like a relatively low professionalism type of opportunity to this really high professionalism, high expectations opportunity. So when I was first in nonprofit, it was sort of really ragtag. And when I was, for instance, I worked at the Children's Medical Center Foundation, and that is a business. It just happens to be a fundraising business and a creating impact business, and the same thing with Girl Scouts. And so there is that level of challenge and those high expectations and the opportunity to solve really unique and interesting problems that I really love. And the other thing is that it always changes. So, especially in fundraising, there's always some new donor to go after, some new story to tell, something new to do. And so you don't get bored, which is, I think, my number one priority. So those are some of the perks, but really all of it is a perk.
That's great. I echo what they've said. I would give you two answers to this. One is kind of an answer that's become my mantra that the AFP chapter in Dallas will hear every meeting from me next year, is that there is not a patient cured, there is not a homeless person fed, there's not an animal rescued, there's not a student that goes to school if it isn't for the development professional. They are involved in all those areas. If our society does not have the nonprofit sector, it fails. And our society has the nonprofit sector because of the development professional. And so as you get into the work in the nonprofit field, you will see at times that there is a difference between development and program side. And there shouldn't be. I preach that to my clients all the time, that we need to cross over and learn. There needs to be appreciation on both sides. And sometimes, especially at universities, the development office or the advancement office isn't even on the campus. It's, in an old, beautiful home that they have somewhere off site. And so sometimes we lose track of that. So I would say one of the great perks for me is that, when I worked in the field every day, and even now, I got through at the meeting this morning with the guy who is the head of Interstate Battery down here, and he just gave money to help a woman and her child. I got to be part of that through this ministry that I worked with down here. And they would have never met each other if it wasn't for us helping them do the work correctly. So you get to be parts of that all the time. You get to be parts of what the final product is. And so that would be, one of, to me, the greatest perks is that we honestly get to be involved with the changing of the world in the work that we do. And I know that sounds big and a pie in the sky, but it's really true. There are young women who will go through Girl Scouts who will change our world. You can look, and I'm sure if I asked you in a second, you'd have the number, but how many senators and Congress people and others are former Girl Scouts? And you would have that because it's true what they do. And so we just see that, that's one of the big pieces of it, is that you actually do change. Now, as far as a personal perk, I've gotten to meet everyone from Desmond Tutu to presidents to others because of working with them, to big name donors that I would never meet. The late Paul Allen and others. I got to sit in a room and get a gift from Neil Young, who, it's crazy that you get to do that and that happens. So those are sometimes perks that you go home with and you just go, holy cow, I can't believe I just did this. So it's really neat. But the bigger perk, and you can never lose your eyes of, is that you really do get to have an influence if not on the world as a whole, at least on your little corner of it. There are people that the Girl Scouts will affect that will do things that are greater that we will never ever know. And that's why I love them as an organization. So you're welcome for the commercial. So give to the Girl Scouts today.
Every female Secretary of State, most of the women who've been in space, and most of the Senate women have been Girl Scouts. So there you go. I do have the numbers right off the top of my head.
Perfect.
By the way,
and with
that's
that-
why she's good at development right there. It's because she has those ready.
Gonna chime in real quick with a question from the chat. Millette asks, will volunteer experience mitigate a lack of professional experience in the nonprofit sector?
I would say it depends on the volunteer experience, right? So if you are volunteering with a very specific mission and that mission is related to the opportunity that you're applying for, then there's a chance where, like Rebecca said earlier, you speak that language and you're able to really show that your volunteer experience will serve you in the needs of the job. If you are saying I have generic volunteer experience serving at a homeless shelter, but you're applying to a totally different organization in the arts and culture space, then perhaps not. So it's still really about how does that volunteer experience apply to the work that you're trying to do, the job that you're trying to get.
I just hired on for our company a young woman who had volunteered for the Boys and Girls Club, ended up getting a job there for like a month before they canceled all their camps. And so she came to work for me, but she had put on events. She had helped them with their volunteer events. And so she had administrative skills that I desperately needed. And we hired her on in just a second as soon as, we're probably 2 minutes into the interview and I said, you know, you're hired. I was not a really good poker face. So yes, it will help. But again, to the points being made, you need to be very clear about what you were doing. Also, I would just tell anybody on resume work and everything, I don't know where everybody got into this. You have to have a one-page resume. Do not do that. I coach people. Remember, the job that I came from was recruiting. And so what I tell people all the time is write down what you have, and especially, and my two colleagues are going to shake their head here, especially the database that you've worked in. Because if you've worked in a Razor's Edge, a Donor Perfect, or anything like that in your volunteer experience, that's a keyword that everybody searches. They're searching for that. And the main reason is people like me or hiring authorities don't want to sit there and train you on a database. So if you've had that work, make sure you include it, especially if it's been in your volunteer work.
Awesome. And Rebecca, did you get to add to that question?
Yeah, I would say, if possible, when you're volunteering, write down everything that you do and make sure that you are as specific as possible so that if you're in college and you have 4 years of a variety of volunteer experience, keep that in, whether it be your resume or even on a Word doc, so that it can be used when necessary on your resume. And I would also say, you know, when you are, I think your next question is going to talk about resume and our advice. And one thing is to make sure, I would say, to tailor your resume to adjust to the position that you are applying for. And that's especially helpful for volunteer experience. If you have volunteer experience that directly relates to a job responsibility for that job application, make sure that's there and it's shining in your resume. So adjusting your resume and making sure that you are very specific about the responsibilities will go far in providing more information about what you've done in the past.
Awesome. So I'm actually selfishly going to plug the Career Center here because absolutely, yes, volunteer experience, I tell this to students all the time, volunteer experience is absolutely 100% professional experience. Absolutely included as you would any kind of other professional experience, write your bullet points, things like that. We don't actually, our younger students, we encourage them to stay in that one page, but if you've got the experience, I say bring on those 2 pages, right? So those are things that we're teaching, and absolutely, you guys hit on your transferable skills, you know, regardless of what your degree was. And so those are things that we're always preaching as well, but they don't want to hear it from us. So I'm so glad that you guys said it, because, you know, now I have you on camera. So
can I add one thing about this part of it, because I obviously interview a lot of people. Every one of the organizations we go into that are building nonprofits, that are emerging nonprofits, one of the first things I try to do as a consultant is we sign 16-month contracts. I try to replace myself in about month 12 and bring in a person and have them walk with me through the last 6 months of our contract, so I can just download into them. Everybody wants the guy with 20 years experience, but they want to pay, you know, the least amount of money. And my colleagues, again, had to go through that, and now they're reaching a point where they are. One of the things that I would tell you, especially if you're going into development, ask for the job. When you're in your interview, ask for the job if it's one that you want. We are in the development work. Our job is asking for a living. And so if I have someone who's not confident enough in their skills to ask me for the position, I darn well know that they're not going to be good enough to ask for money for the organization by the time they're there. And so I do work with friends of mine. I've been a mentor to a bunch of AFP people who have moved on from the Dallas chapter and gotten better jobs. And I tell them at the very end, if it's a job that you want, when you get to the end of the interview, I would say, Satin, listen, I've heard about this job, and I really think I'm a great fit for this, and I'd love to do it. Is there anything else that you need to hear from me for you to feel comfortable in offering this position? Because I think I'm ready to work for you all. I'm ready to start this position. That is so impressive when you go in to someone who's a hiring authority, and I'm one of those who does it, because I go, oh my goodness, they ask for it. My biggest problem working with development people is they don't know how to do the ask. And a lot of them will tell you, and I think this goes back to your earlier statement about it used to be a ragtag type of group of people, right? It wasn't as professional as it is now. Now it's much more professional, but that would just be something that I would share, that you know, that you need to just go in and close the deal. Ask for the job, you know, ask for it. Say, I'm ready. Let's go. Let's start this right now. So just a suggestion.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for that. So we are on kind of the last 2 questions here. This is always one of my favorite questions to ask the panelists. What do you wish you would have known as an undergraduate, as a graduate, as a doctoral candidate, that you know now that you didn't know then, when choosing your career path? Is there any sort of, you know, nugget of information you want to share? I'm constantly telling students, you know, career paths aren't linear, and these panels kind of back it up. So please share anything that you wish you knew then that you know now.
Sure. I will say the biggest thing is, I think going into college, there's a focus on looking at the job responsibilities and less of a focus on the other aspects of the job that play a huge role: the work-life balance, the people that you're going to work with, the commute. I mean, all these other aspects that make a job what you have to live with. And I mean, I just think about the fact that, you know, for most of our jobs, we spend more time with the people in our jobs than we spend with our family or our friends. So I would say, you know, of course you want to be in a job where you find the job responsibilities fulfilling, but that's not everything. That doesn't make up an entire job. You want to make sure that you're happy with the culture of the organization, that you feel free to have discourse and not feel like you're going to be penalized for that, that you can say that you have an emergency and don't feel like you're going to be penalized for that. These are all things that will make a job more fulfilling and ultimately a job that you'll probably stay in longer and flourish more with. So I would say to students, always look at the job responsibilities, but also look at the other aspects of the job that greatly impact your overall happiness with it.
I love that. I love that. That's such great advice and a good reminder for those of us on the panel as well. I always tell people to run towards something and never run away from something. I feel like every person throughout their career will hit a point where they're just ready to grow. They're ready to move on. That just happens. It's natural. And a lot of us, and I've made this mistake, can get frustrated and just want to quit, want to leave, want to move on, be ready for something else. And I think the biggest mistakes that I've made and the places where I've been the most successful are always when I am running towards something. That's when I'm going to get the best out of it. And so I would recommend, always be running towards something, figure out your goal for yourself and work towards that. Don't let the job environment or the landscape or anything like that dictate how you approach something.
The only thing, by the way, that is both, I love that. I always tell people, don't run away. You'll just run into another problem. So I think that's excellent. One thing that I would share that's probably very, very specific is don't ever talk about your boss. Don't do that to other people. Don't talk about it. It gets around. The Harvard Business Journal tells us that praise publicly brings influence privately. And I share this with everyone. Don't ever say anything about them to others. It gets around very quickly. Things happen and you lose any influence with your boss when you get there. We are all going to have bosses. We're all going to have them. We're all going to not like things that they do. It's just going to happen. We always think we can run the organization better. And what you need to do is you just need to be that person that can tell the emperor he's not wearing any clothes. But you do that behind private doors and you talk to them about it and you share with them, here are my feelings, but they always hear you publicly to your donors and everywhere else saying what a wonderful job they do and how excited you are for the organization. The other way doesn't help at all.
That you guys all had such incredible answers. And Rebecca, I just want to say that this is kind of a perfect segue into my final question. You mentioned discourse. One of my favorite questions to ask during an interview is tell me about a time you had a disagreement with a colleague or a coworker and how you resolved it. And I don't necessarily care that you fought, because we spend so much time with these people. Eventually there's going to be some sort of disagreement. I really want to know how you came together afterwards. Because you do have to have that space for disagreement, but you also have to have that space to work it out. And so I just think, yeah, you guys gave such incredible answers and I love that. And so I'm parlaying that into the final question I have is any kind of general advice or anecdotes or stories you want to share about resumes and interviewing. What do you look for in your potential employees? Is it these technical skills? Paul mentioned, the database. Are you looking for more transferable skills, that kind of thing? Just whoever would like to jump in and answer. That will be our final question for this panel.
Sure, I'll start and say one thing that I think is super important that sometimes is asked for, but sometimes is not, is a really strong sample piece of writing, whether that be an essay or a project report that you have, something that you can keep on your computer and that you can send off to potential employers that shows that you can tell a story. And it doesn't have to be necessarily really closely related to the position that you're applying for, but just something to show that you can tell a story effectively and succinctly. And that is one thing I will say, that Paper for Water is looking for 2 college interns. We have a paid internship opportunity in the spring of next year. So if anyone has any questions, they can look on Paper for Water's website and email me. But yes, that's one of the things that I immediately put, because it does really demonstrate a lot of important skill sets to see a strong piece of writing.
This sounds really just mundane, but there's a certain level of knowledge about the organization, like you took the time to look something up, and a passion for the organization that you have to have in nonprofit. You're not getting a job for just to put in your 40 hours, like Paul said. You're getting a job really because you are passionate about changing the world in a certain particular way. And so even if that's not necessarily the primary driver for you, being able to articulate that and tell that story is really, really important to show the hiring manager, show whoever colleagues you're interviewing with, that you really have the passion in order to tell that story and in order to stay with that organization.
Yeah, and I think they covered a lot of it, and I, of course, earlier talked about some of the things I look for. I think everybody needs to realize, and again, my colleagues on this call will balance this out for me, but when you go into nonprofit work, with nonprofits I'll work with large organizations, universities, hospitals, and whatever, and the development path there is different than a development path for most of the organizations, which is the kind of the generalist. The development generalist. You know, Rebecca's working with a couple that she, talks about wearing 20 hats. That means she's a writer at one moment, a major donor person another, a direct mail person at another moment.
And a technician. Today we had our printer go out, so technician as well.
So for the majority of your nonprofits, which are smaller nonprofits, you kind of have to wear a lot of hats, whereas when you get into larger organizations, and especially in the university and hospital settings, you can become a grant writer for 30 years. You can become a major donor person that has your portfolio of 70 major donor that you work with, and you just work with them. You can work in corporate giving, and you can decide that, and those although it's development, there are definitely some different areas in each of those that you do differently. You work with a foundation completely different than you work with an individual donor or corporation. There are some things that go across. So just to let the people who are on the phone know, there are definitely, as I would say, I always talk about 2 different career paths. And one of them, you get into the university system and you can bounce around and do the different areas or whatever system. And then the other one, you go work for, one of the smaller organizations, and you're in there and you're learning everything. And so just to realize that. I don't know if you guys have found that. Rebecca and Dee, have you found that also?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I work in corporate giving, and it's very different from any other path. And it is something that I'm very good at corporate giving, and I do not work with individuals. And so it's definitely specialized. There are definitely different landscapes to different organizations. And that's absolutely something to keep in mind as you're interviewing. You don't want to tell an organization that's bigger that you're able to wear a lot of hats and juggle a lot of things if that's not what they need.
Exactly.
All right, so we are down to the last couple minutes. We are on a slight delay, but I am going to open up the chat just for like these last few minutes and let the students know if they have any last minute questions or anything like that. They can reach out now. But you guys, this has really been an incredible panel. I'm so glad we got to go out on this high note, and I think the stories that you have shared have been impactful. Again, it's so important to me to get the students facing with people that are in potential careers, and that they know that there are people out there that look like them and maybe didn't have the degree exactly, maybe they had a mathematics degree. So I'd love to hear that, and I just love all the experiences you shared. So I'm incredibly grateful for you guys to be here. Jason, did we have any, we're in our final few minutes, do we have any questions?
One thing I will say.
Sorry.
One thing I'll say quickly, that if you're a student, don't be afraid to reach out to people. And I would say the vast majority of the people in the nonprofit sector want to help out people, aspiring people in the nonprofit field. We want to help. We're willing to help. We're willing to put in a word or even review your resume or talk to you, have a call. I think the vast majority of people will say yes. So don't be afraid to reach out to someone if they see your enthusiasm and care. Most people are going to respond really positively to that. So if you have any questions about the field that you're interested, reach out to the people who are in that field, because I guarantee you'll probably get a lot farther than what you expect from that.
Rebecca, when I was in recruiting and I did that, one of our best ways of getting people was actually I would call someone from the company and I would say, hey, who have you interviewed lately that might be interested? I worked with CFOs and stuff, so I would talk to them about their accounting managers, bringing it back to math for us, because that seems to be our theme, is math. So, but I would talk to them and I would say, who do you know? And I got to tell you all, I can't tell you how many resumes that I get that come from someone else. So tagging on that, I can tell you that nonprofits are looking for people right now. Although, unfortunately, the nonprofit industry as a whole nationwide has had about 1 million people that they furloughed or laid off. There are still areas that they're looking, and frankly, they're looking for people who are younger to help people like me who are older, because all of this is new to some of them. And so they need someone to help them through that. So absolutely, I'll reach out to any of us here I know would help, but that's how I find out all the time. I'll ask someone who's on the board with me and I'll say, guys, do you all know I have one of my clients that's needing a grant writer, and I'll get 4 of them in. I don't think I've ever placed an ad for one. So that's how it happens.
All right. And Jason, do we have any final questions?
We don't have anything coming in to the Q&A channel, but while we're waiting to see if any student questions come in, kind of bouncing off of Ms. Reyes' comment, what is the best way that you recommend students reach out to nonprofit members if they want to start networking or they want to ask questions, like you said?
I would say first start off, especially as a student, connect with your professors and see what connections they have. I think people will be even more willing to speak to you if you say, oh, I'm in so-and-so's class and I know that you know them and I was wondering, I had this question. Talk to your professors, talk if you have an internship, or see if I don't think that even cold emails will go unnoticed unless it's a very busy time. But for the most part, talk to your professors first. Talk to any clubs that you're involved with or nonprofit sector areas that may have some connections. But yeah, I would say start off with professors, especially as a student.
I would add to that, stalk people on LinkedIn and figure out who they know so that you can get introductions. And a lot of times, if you just reach out for a connection, if they accept your connection and they're willing to kind of start a conversation, then they're really, really open to, hey, can we get a virtual cup of coffee and talk about your field, etc.
There's not a week that goes by that I don't have someone connect to me through LinkedIn for exactly that. Paul, I heard you speak at a conference. Can I ask you this? The other thing I would say, which goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is if you're going to reach out to Rebecca, look at her organization that she's working with, find out what's going on to make sure that you don't get her in the middle of an event and you'll be disappointed. You know, I can't tell you how many times that someone's tried to get me, and I've been on the road for like a 2-week trip working with the client, and they don't know that because it's a little different with me. And I get back to them, but I know they're probably thinking, gosh, he didn't get back to me. Oh, I can't believe that. And it was just because that darn job thing came in the way. You know, I had to do that part for a little bit. So anyway, that would be something also.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys so much again for joining us. I really seriously cannot thank you enough. That is going to conclude the panel at this time. You guys enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
And thanks for having us.
Thank you. Take care.